disappeared from the streets of Buffalo in 2003 or 2004 when she was approximately 40 years old. Marquita Mull was approximately 50 years old when she was last seen in the Broadway neighborhood of the city of Buffalo in July of 2021. They were both found in September of 2021 in Chautauqua County. And today we have the beginning of some closure for the families of these two women. Cassandra Watson's skull was found by a hiker off the Chautauqua Rails to Trails in the town of Portland on September 26, 2021. And the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office responded to the scene where they found the rest of her skeletal remains. As I indicated, she had been last seen in 2003 or 2004. So this was approximately 17 or 18 years later. Her remains were found in what appeared to be a shallow or like a 6-inch grave off the Rails to Trails area. And the Sheriff's Department then contacted the Mercyhurst College, which is maybe 30 or 40 minutes away in Pennsylvania, as I'm sure you're all aware. Mercyhurst has forensic pathologists and forensic anthropologists that work there, and they assisted with the exhumation and the recovery of the remains. And while exhuming the skeletal remains of Cassandra Watson, what turned out to be Cassandra Watson, the next day, they discovered another body that was in a garbage tote a short distance away, maybe about 10 yards away from Cassandra Watson. That turned out to be Marquita Mull. Both bodies were taken to Mercyhurst College for an examination, and the work to identify them began. And by examining skeletal remains, forensic pathologists and forensic anthropologists are able to determine some range as to the how long the body has been there, or when the time of death, but not with any exact science, depending on how long the remains have been in the elements and how they have decompensated. But they are able to determine the age, the race, and the gender of a person whose remains are recovered. And so they had that basic information with respect to Cassandra Watson and Marquita Mull early on. The forensic odontologist, with the information that Marquita Mull was approximately 40-year-old black female, the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office started looking at other potential missing persons. And they identified Marquita Mull as someone who fit that description. And then the forensic odontologist, who is also a Mercyhurst College person, works there. And that person was able to identify from the dental records of Marquita Mull that the person in the garbage tote was in those remains was in fact Marquita Mull. So she was identified, and that was in 2021. The older skeletal remains, the ones that were found in what I've described as the shallow grave, were more difficult to identify. The Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office sent those remains to various labs for examination and testing. And then finally, in October of 2024, a laboratory in Texas, located in Texas, was able to notify the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office that there was a possible match for the skeletal remains that had been found in that shallow grave. The testing identified a sibling of the person whose remains were located in that grave. And that sibling was a man by the name of Darian Green. Now, in 2024, Darian Green had already passed away. He had died a few years earlier. We understand that he had died during COVID. So the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office continued their work on this case. They eventually, with the help of the other agencies, including the Buffalo Police Department, they identified other family members of Darian Green that lived in the Buffalo area. And then with the help of the Buffalo Police Department, additional evidence was recovered, and a sample from one of those surviving family members, a niece, was sent, and it was determined that there was a familial relationship. In fact, the niece, as I indicated, of Cassandra Watson was living here in Buffalo, New York. After Cassandra was identified, the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office and the Buffalo Police Department continued their investigation to try to figure out when Cassandra disappeared and under what circumstances. There was no indication that there was any report filed of a missing person back in 2003 or 2004, but that is the last time that Cassandra was known to have been seen by any of her surviving family members. So that's why we have that estimate as to her disappearance and the estimate as to her time of death, that it was in 2003 or 2004. At that time, Cassandra would have been around 40 years old. The Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office continued to investigate various databases and records that are available to them, and they determined that in the early 2000s, Cassandra lived in the city of Buffalo with Richard Fox, the defendant. They also, in looking at various records, they determined that Richard Fox lived in Chautauqua County in the early part of his life growing up. He actually lived in Portland, the very town where the bodies were discovered, and only about a half a mile away from where the bodies were discovered as a child when he was growing up. And then he later lived in another area in Chautauqua County as he grew older. And as I indicated, that was his family home was only about a half a mile from where the bodies were buried. And then with the work with the Buffalo Police Department and other agencies, a number of whom I will mention, they tried to locate Richard Fox. And on January 7th of this year, Richard Fox was located in Niagara County. He was located by the Niagara Falls Police Department, who then contacted the Buffalo Police Department and the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department, and they brought Richard Fox back to the city of Buffalo. On January 7th, going into January 8th, 2025, Richard Fox was arrested and charged with the murder of Marquita Mull. And the investigation of Cassandra Watson continued. That was the status of the evidence that we had at that time and the investigations that we were able to charge him with the murder of Marquita Mull. And the investigation continued into the death of Cassandra Watson. Now, some of that additional evidence has been developed, and I can't talk about some of it. And I know that there were certain statements made in court today with respect to a bail argument, and I'm sure you'll ask me about those. I hope you understand that there is a difference between what we can say in court, especially on a bail argument, and what I can say to the public in a press conference. There are specific laws in New York State that limit what I can say at press conferences, and I'm certainly going to abide by those. But the bottom line is the allegations are that Richard Fox murdered both of these women, and that the evidence is going to show that he strangled them both in the city of Buffalo. Cassandra in 2003 or 2004, and Marquita in 2021. And that after he killed Cassandra, he transported her body to Chautauqua County, where he left her in the area where she was discovered back in 2021, where her remains were discovered in 2021. And then when he killed Marquita in 2021, he did the same thing. He transported her body, her remains, to Chautauqua County, the town of Portland, and in a garbage tote, left her, as I indicated, very short distance away from where he had left Cassandra's remains years earlier. And he left them there because they would be hidden and difficult to find, which of course they were. Now, it's important for me to note that these are allegations only, and that Richard Fox is innocent unless and until proven guilty. But as I had mentioned earlier, I think if I hadn't mentioned it, Richard Fox had been in a relationship with Cassandra Watson. That was part of the investigation that my partners in law enforcement uncovered as they looked into Richard Fox, and they identified him as living in a same apartment with Cassandra Watson back in the early 2000s. They lived together. They were boyfriend and girlfriend, and he knew her. That is how he was connected to Cassandra Watson, through, quite honestly, dogged determination and investigation by the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office and the Buffalo Police Department. He did not. We do not believe, and we do not think there will be evidence that he knew Marquita Mull in the same way, or really at all. He picked her up on the streets of the city of Buffalo. We believe that the evidence is going to show that she willingly got into his vehicle, and then he later killed her. Now, oftentimes I say at press conferences that I cannot talk about certain aspects of cases, and I just explained to you in some respects why that is, because of the specific laws that govern what we can discuss, and the types of evidence we can discuss at press conferences. But one of the other things is that I often say is that I can't talk about certain things during investigations, and I say that oftentimes because we want to preserve the integrity of the investigation, and it's important that we preserve the secrecy and confidential nature of the evidence that we're uncovering during the course of an investigation. And that I don't know if that sounds like something we just say, but it's not. And I think that is going to be critically clear here at the conclusion of this case, because the details and the evidence will be made clear during the course of the prosecution of this case and the eventual trial. And it will be crystal clear as to why that evidence, and we do not disclose evidence during the course of an investigation. And I look forward to the opportunity to explain it, at that time. Now, again, I'll say that Richard Fox is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. I noted at the outset that our grand jury in Erie County completed its investigation, and they returned 2 counts of murder in the second degree against Richard Fox for the killings of Marquita Mull and Cassandra Watson. The case is scheduled to be returned on April 30th, 2025 for a pretrial conference, and the court scheduled a trial date for October of 2025. That's the next time we will be in court, is October 30th, 2025. And before I turn this over to my partners in law enforcement, I want to recognize some of the people that are up here with me today. And there are many more people that were involved in the investigation and the successful completion of the investigation to this point. And I think it's important that I recognize them. And it's not, in this case, it's not just, public sector law enforcement officials. Obviously, we have a number of members of the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department here today, and their determination and commitment to solve these cases, after the discovery of these bodies is commendable. And I think it's important that I recognize my partners in their determination. And I have with me here the Chautauqua County Sheriff, James Quattrone, along with some members of his department who were, critical in this investigation. And they worked extremely well. And I'm sure they can share that with you more specifically, with their partners, whether it's the New York State Police or the, smaller town departments, but the Buffalo Police Department as well. I have here with me the Chief of Detectives, Craig Macy, here today. Thank you for being here, Craig. Sure. Along with one of my deputy district attorneys, John Ferletto. John has handled this investigation since its inception. And John did a great job of working with the number of people that have been involved in this case, and that is in the dozens. So we've also had the FBI involved. We have the Erie Crime Analysis Center, which is part of this investigation. And, there's a number of, as I indicated, a number of police officers here, and I'll let Chief Macy and Sheriff Quattrone identify them and recognize them. it's, I say it all the time, but we don't do these very challenging jobs. We do not do them in a vacuum. We have to work together with the partners that we have in law enforcement. But in this case, we also had help from the private sector, the labs that I mentioned, the Mercyhurst College. It was a significant, contributor in this investigation, and they will be moving forward. But I also think I want to say that the public should remain vigilant, and this is our opportunity to encourage the public to come forward with any information that they may have about Richard Fox. He is remanded. He will be held in custody during the pendency of this case. And if anybody has any information about him, please come forward with it. Our great partners, the sheriff is going to speak, and I'm going to turn it over to him now. But the Buffalo Police are going to remain involved along with some of our other law enforcement members. But this is a good day because we have some closure for the families. It's just the beginning of the closure, but it is some closure that they know what happened. It's horrible, but at least we have some answers for the family members that were here today. They were here in court. They were here in our office, and John met with them shortly before we came in to talk to you. But I'm going to turn it over now to Sheriff Quattrone for any remarks that he may have.
Good afternoon. Today was really the next step in obtaining justice for Cassandra and Marquita. And the reason we're able to be here is, as the district attorney mentioned, is started off with a member of the public reporting finding the skull, a members of the public reporting a suspicion that they may have an idea who the individuals were found on the trails. And these are some of the members of the group of the Western New York Missing and Murdered People. But they contacted us. We took their information and we followed up on it. This investigation has been going on over 3 years. And I say this as often we hear people talk about cold cases. I refuse to use that as a terminology. I like to call them unsolved cases because of the work of our investigators, our detectives, many law enforcement agencies around really New York State and around the country that continued to work and help us with this case is what led us to being here today. I really want to lift up, our investigative team, Sergeant Luke Johnson, Lieutenant Alex Nutt, Investigator Jake Staley, that have worked tirelessly on this case. But they've partnered with many other agencies, and specifically in this case, the Buffalo Police Department, who have always been there. They've been down to Chautauqua County many times. Our investigators have been up to Buffalo, following up on leads and sharing information. Cases are solved because of the willingness of people to collaborate in the different agencies, including the District Attorney's Office, Chautauqua County District Attorney's Office. As the DA mentioned, our Mercyhurst, we've had a great working relationship over the years with Mercyhurst Forensic Anthropology Division. They come and help us, as you mentioned, exhume the body. I apologize. Helped us exhume the bodies, help us to develop the evidence. We will continue to investigate. We'll continue to investigate through the trial and uncover any evidence that will help us through this trial and get any conviction. But I thank you, and again, hats off to the investigators who have spent so much time on this case.
Thank you, Sheriff. And now if Chief Macy would like to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to echo the appreciation I have for the detectives in the Buffalo Police Department, as well as the investigators from the Sheriff's Office and the District Attorney's Office for always being there and being available to us when we have not only legal questions, but maybe some technical questions. And this is a good step for the families to get some closure. There's a lot of work, 3 years of working in on these cases. It's a lot of time and effort. So thank you to my detectives as well.
Chief. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are you looking at any other cases? It sounds like you might be other unsolved cases.
Well, our partners, I think as the sheriff suggested, they're going to continue their investigation. And if there are any additional leads that come forward as a result of today's press conference, we are certainly going to look at those. Clearly we have enough evidence here to move forward with the murders of these two women, and that's what we're doing. But any other evidence that comes to support, the case that the two cases that we're here talking about is certainly going to be welcome. In addition to that, any other information anybody has about Richard Fox, I encourage people to come forward and contact either the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department, the Buffalo Police Department, or our office directly.
In 2005, he was charged with aggravated sexual assault and attempted rape of a 42-year-old woman in Buffalo. Is it possible that he may have also committed other crimes towards similarly aged women? Maybe not murder, but is that something else you're investigating as other crimes?
So I understand the question. I appreciate it. It is one of those frustrating rules that I'm sure on your end in the public, that I cannot talk about any prior convictions or crimes of any defendant. So unfortunately, I cannot answer the question.
At any point over the 17 years was she reported missing?
She being Cassandra.
Yeah.
We have no indication of that. There's no report that supports that. And I hesitate to mention that. The reason I actually brought that up as the fact that there was no report is because it's why we don't know, similar to Marquita, when she disappeared. Marquita's family reported her missing almost immediately. And we don't have the same information with respect to Cassandra. So it's hard to know exactly when she died, but we know it was between 2003, 2004. But the reason I'm hesitant because I don't want anybody to think that, we are in any way critical of family members. She was an adult. I mean, she was, I think around a 40-year-old, or is it 50 years? 40. She was around 40 years old. Yeah, she was around 40 years old when she was last seen. So, the fact that, she wasn't a child that somebody would immediately call the police and report missing. But the answer to the question is we don't have any report.
Do we know anything more about her, about Cassandra Watson? Of an age, she lived, where in Buffalo? Anything?
We know where she lived in Buffalo in the early 2000s. We certainly know her date of birth. We know her family members, many of whom, as I think I mentioned already, were here in the city of Buffalo. Back then, she had a number of siblings, all of whom are passed, but she's got nieces and nephews and cousins that still live today, and are here supporting her. And we also, of course, know that she was in a relationship with Richard Fox at the end of the end of this 1999, 2000, early 2000s.
Was the DNA that connected her, was that from like an ancestry.com or something, or how did that come about? So,
Maki, that's one of the specific limitations that I have, believe it or not, on what I cannot talk about. So I cannot talk about specific DNA testing or reports on any case. But, obviously there are a number of private entities out there that do the testing that you described. And we were able to develop family members and contact them. And that was very helpful.
How were you able to determine that Cassandra Watson was in a relationship with Richard Fox?
You guys want to address that? I know one of the ways was certainly by records that we can access, that our investigators access in various databases. I don't know if you want to go any further than that.
I think the best answer is the investigators were diligent in investigating, doing interviews around the city of Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and that's where they were able to develop the leads on getting an identification in making family contact and then leading to that relationship.
Is it fair to say interviews with those who were close to either of Richard Fox or Cassandra Watson in that canvassing process?
Go ahead, Sheriff.
I would say primarily the family members of Cassandra.
Sheriff, while you're up there, can we just run down again the beginning when how the bodies were found? Someone found them, and you found one, and the other. Kind of run down the timeline of those few days there.
Yes. So we got a report in September 26th of 2021. It was a lady who was hiking on the Rails to Trail, actually looking for glass and bottles. And that's where she came across what she felt was a skull, reported to our office. We responded that afternoon, secured the scene, and then the next day went there with our forensic identification team, as well as we requested Mercyhurst College and their forensic anthropology unit to come down and help us to do grid searches. And the second body, Marquita Mull, was located about 10 yards from the first set of remains in a garbage tote.
Do you think?
Can you talk about, like, I know you couldn't say then that they were connected, but what was going through your mind in terms of finding two sets of remains so close at such a remote place?
Yes, I wasn't prepared back then to say that they were related, but I'm not really a believer in coincidences either. So yes, did we believe that there was probably some relationship to the two sets of remains? Absolutely. But to be able to say that at that time, I didn't want to create any hysteria or anything going on there. So now, as you know, we are comfortable in saying that.
Were Cassandra Watson's remains buried, or were they just found kind of like because of weather over time? Like, do you know if you put her, like, dug and put her there, or is that not fair to say?
I'm not sure. I couldn't
Did you
say.
just leave her there, or did you like try to hide her at the time?
Well, where the remains were found, it was off the main path, and back then the rails to travel wasn't operating. I don't believe, and it wouldn't have been an area that most of the people who use rails to trail would get off that path to check that.
I imagine that their bodies are part of evidence right now, but how soon might families be able to, in a situation like this, bury their loved ones?
I'm not sure.
Well, we're gonna, as I indicated, we're gonna have a trial in October. Obviously, they can have a service, but evidence, and I don't want to be too specific, but evidence in this case has to be preserved as part of the discovery process and pending the trial. You know? Sorry, whether there's been a burial or not.
I don't know.
Okay, so yeah, that's the best I can answer.
How important has family cooperation been throughout this investigation to get to this point of both of these women?
Well, it's been critical. I think without family support, Cassandra's, well, in both cases, Cassandra's and Marquita's families, we wouldn't be standing here today. And again, to echo what the sheriff said, the public support that we've had in cooperation, from just starting with the hiker, has been critically important to solving this case. So, and these are very, very challenging cases. The family members were here today, and they're certainly glad that Mr. Fox has been indicted, and that they're glad that they, are able to understand what happened to their loved ones, because not knowing is, I'm sure is awful. But these are emotional situations and cases, and I'm always surprised at how helpful and cooperative the families are in light of that trauma, that emotion. But they've been very, very helpful.
Where did Cassandra and Richard live when they lived together?
In the city of Buffalo, in an apartment.
I believe you said that Marquita Mull was transported in a garbage tote.
Yes.
Did you recover that from? Was the tote also found around her body or anything like that, or was that subsequent to? Can you say anything about the tote?
It's a nondescript tote. It's not, it doesn't, it's not like it's not like a City of Buffalo, recycling bin or tote like that, but it's one that you would get at like a hardware store. And her remains were recovered inside the tote. I'm not sure if you understood that part.
And they were about 10 yards apart, is that right?
Yes. Anything else?
Can you just, it sounds like figuring the part that really broke the case was Cassandra Watson, right? Because I know for years you've been trying to figure out her identity, right?
Yes, that's absolutely true. Once we understood that Cassandra Watson and Richard Fox had a relationship and that they lived together, and as I think the sheriffs described, that came from a number of different sources, including, we are all, our information is all out there in various databases, where we live, who we live with, and that commitment to trying to identify, these remains is commendable by our law enforcement partners. And, once they made that connection between Richard Fox, obviously this case came to a head very quickly. That was just at the end of December, I think. And by January 7th, we had Richard Fox in custody.
Do you think solving their identities and figuring out who they are, do you think that gives hope to other families in the area that might have cold cases? Because I know the technology is advanced, like you're talking about DNA, you're talking about using databases and that kind of thing. Could you just talk a little bit about, is there a new hope there for some other cases in the area?
Yeah, I think there always is hope. I think that one of the benefits of shining a light on this case is that hopefully people will come forward with additional information, whether it's about Richard Fox or these cases or anything else. But to your point about additional technology and testing that's available now, when I started here in 1994, none of this stuff existed. And we have incredible tools available to us, even basic tools like video cameras that are on telephone poles. But the technology that we have today didn't exist in 2003 and 2004 when Cassandra went missing, and it was it has been invaluable in us solving these cases.
Touch on that real quick.
Sure, of course.
When you asked that question, I wanted to address it. The family of Marquita, the family of Cassandra, they have been so helpful, and not only helping solve the case, but at times checking in with the investigators in the law enforcement to make sure that they're doing okay. That's something that I have never experienced. But you ask about hope. We all need hope. And does it add hope to the families who have missing ones? I would hope so. And I anticipate that. But it also adds maybe a level of despair to them too, because their loved ones have not been located yet. What we want to offer is we're going to continue to work on all of the cases. We have in Chautauqua County, we do have a team of investigators that their sole purpose and sole duties are to investigate unsolved cases. And we're going to continue doing that and continue the collaboration with agencies around the state and around the country, and actually internationally, to do our best to find some solutions and just some closure. Closure is sometimes a bad word to use, because I don't know that you'll ever have closure when you have a loved one missing or a deceased.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.